Talk, shop, pop, movies.
Are you shooting a video while you're pooping?
I've shot it 6 times.
Well, it smells like death in here.
You don't know what death is. Ahoy there, this is Derek, the Convicted Cinephile, and if you're a convicted cinephile yourself, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel down below. On my channel, I'd like to talk, shop, and pop open, that is, movies and physical media. Welcome to the first official OCT2BER video. Yes, it's still September when I'm making it, but, you know, to hell with yous. Yes, Halloween 2 will be the topic of this video. Taking advantage of the slasher boom of the early 80s, JC, John Carpenter, our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ himself, and Deborah Hill took advantage of the inevitable sequel, Halloween 2, in 1981. In fact, sequels were fairly rare back in those days, hard to believe, to the point where they actually had to literally put the words "all new" on the poster just so people would know that it was a new movie. You think the 2 would give it away, but apparently people are idiots. Carpenter had zero interest in directing a sequel. He didn't even want to make one in the first place. He basically only did it because he felt that the company owed him money from the original that he never got due to its massive success. So he essentially made this one as a producer and writer to get some back-end money from the film. Instead, he had his buddy Rick Rosenthal direct the film, who directed another sequel that nobody asked for, The Birds 2, Land's End, which is available from the fine folks at Vinegar Syndrome on Blu-ray as of like last month. The film was tagged with the line "More of the Night He Came Home" due to its logical starting point of the end of the first film. Yes, this is a continuation from Halloween 1 directly into Halloween 2, which I was always a massive fan of. When I was obsessed with these movies when I was like 12, 13 years old, I would very often just do a double feature with Halloween 1 and 2 back and forth on an almost daily basis. Given the, pretty normal for sequels 3-year gap in between the two, it's sort of risky to do a sequel that leads directly from the original film. But luckily for them, they were able to secure the main stars, Jamie Lee Curtis and Donald Pleasance. Luckily, neither of them really aged at all during that 3-year period. The only thing they needed to do was put a wig on Jamie Lee Curtis because her hair was much more brown and short by that time. One of the major things that did change between films, though, is the shape itself, because Nick Castle played the Shape, Michael Myers, in the original film, and he was a taller, lankier fella. But in the second film, the Shape was played by stuntman Dick Warlock, which is coincidentally the name I have in the bedroom from my wife. But anywho, Dick was shorter and stockier, the Dick Warlock, not the bedroom Dick I was referring to, than Nick Castle, and he had a much rounder face. So although it was the same mask from the original film, his face kind of puffed it out a little bit more, so it looked a little different. And the fact that he was shorter and actually had to wear lifts to make him taller because he was that much shorter made it a little weird. And the mask itself was literally just sitting under Deborah Hill's bed for the 3 years, and she was apparently smoked like a chimney. So it's a little more yellow and dusty than it would have been had it been properly taken care of. And sadly, after the film was done, because this was going to be the final Halloween Michael Myers film, because he dies at the end and all that stuff. Spoiler. They actually allowed Dick Warlock to keep the outfit and mask and his knife and stuff, not expecting that they would ever need them again, which is why we got this atrocious piece of crap mask for part 4. But that's enough mask and wiener jokes for now. I'm just gonna get into the plot a little bit. It starts out with Dr. Loomis at the end of the film. The end of the original film is the beginning of this film. They just reuse the footage until the end. And it's funny because in the original film, he falls off the back porch, but then magically in the second film, it's actually the front porch, and then he can run away. It's weird. And then he leaves a cartoon-like body print in the grass, which I always think is hilarious when I rewatch this movie. But, Dr. Loomis, he shoots him 6 times, which, in fact, he actually shoots him 7 times. I noticed when I watched it, and I double-checked on the internet because it's never wrong. And he does shoot him 7 times. He shoots him once, and he kind of stumbles back, and then when he's on the porch / deck, whatever you want to call it, then he shoots him 6 times and he falls off. So he shoots him 7 times in the beginning of Halloween 2. So even he can't count. Baby Dana Carvey of Wayne's World is like a news woman's assistant in the beginning of this film. It's just a funny thing to point out. I've known that since I first saw it as a kid, which is just strange to notice Dana Carvey in a movie from 1981, a handful of years before he was on Saturday Night Live in the first place. But of course, Laurie is injured, and they take her to Haddonfield Memorial Hospital, and I like the little HMH logo for the hospital that they reused in Halloween Kills. I thought that was cool. So it's a nice little nod in that movie to this film, even though according to that film, this film doesn't exist, but that's a whole other video. As they arrive to the hospital, there's a little boy and his mom walking up who has a razor blade shoved in his mouth, theoretically from razor blade in his candy, which is just like, I honestly never noticed it on VHS until I bought the Blu-ray, and then it's very visible. It's like, it's the grossest thing in the movie to me is a kid with a full-size razor blade in his face. Anyways, this was supposed to be a hint toward what was going to be the anthology series that followed this movie, which started with Season of the Witch. That sadly never happened. So maybe we would have seen this kid in a Halloween film had that trend continued. I thought I would have liked to see that movie. I mean, we kind of got it with Trick or Treat, I guess. But, that's not a Halloween movie. Even though it's more of a Halloween movie than Halloween, in my opinion, if that makes sense. And then to make this film have anything going on whatsoever besides people walking around in an underlit, understaffed hospital, they introduce, begrudgingly, according to John Carpenter, who really doesn't like the screenplay for this film that he wrote, the sister subplot, which never bothered me. It makes sense why he would obsessively go after Laurie. You think if she got away, he would just go to the next person in his house and kill them if there was no reason to all this. So it's the one time in this franchise explaining something doesn't completely destroy it, unlike in the Rob Zombie one where they over-explain why he is the way he is for the first hour, and then the second hour is basically just the old Halloween movie. And this one is just like, oh, he happens to be your sister, which makes it, this is why he's so obsessed. It's simple enough that it doesn't completely destroy it for me. There's some gnarly deaths in it. There's some, some throat slittings, some blood drainings, some picking up nurses with scalpels, which I always thought was cool. But the coolest death in this movie is by far the naked hot tub scene scalding face death, which my wife and I were watching, and the young lady gets naked and shows her biddies. And I was just like, woo, biddies, because she wasn't really paying attention. So I just thought it'd be funny to get her attention. And she's like, God, those are like perfect biddies. And I'm like, I know. That she'll get what she deserves for having those perfect biddies, I said. And then, Michael Myers comes up behind and slams her face in the hot tub, repeatedly lifting it in and out. And every time, her face is just more and more burnt, and her skin starts to fall off, and it's awesome. If you haven't seen it, go watch it. If you know what I'm talking about. John Carpenter actually went back and added more scenes of gore and heavier violence because he knew he needed to compete with these newer slasher films that came out after Halloween, like Friday the 13th and The Burning, etc. Because that's the way the things were going at the time. And the director, Rick Rosenthal, really wanted to make it more like the original film, which is very respectable, I must say. I thought it was cool that he wanted to keep the violence to a minimum and just turn up the creep factor, but he had to go the way that the films were going in the theater at the time, so good old JC was smart and added more blood and guts to Halloween 2 than in the original. And then, of course, we have Dr. Loomis and Michael Myers' death at the end of the film, which this really just should have been the last movie with Michael Myers. I like all the rest of them, obviously, but the 1 and 2, they make a good, solid double feature. It's a story from beginning to end, and there's a good ending. They could have kept it that way, which they wanted to do, but no. Fans had to hate on Halloween 3 the next year. But it ends with Michael Myers being shot even more times. Laurie shoots him in both eyes, like with the famous crying blood mask scene. And then Dr. Loomis blows the shit out of the hospital room they're in, with both of them inside of it. And then Michael Myers emerges, in the flames, and then collapses, and then continues to burn to death. And then, they magically come back in part 4, and Dr. Loomis has a burn on his face like that big. It was a good, solid ending, and I love the Mr. Sandman song at the beginning and that bookend this movie. It's just something I've always loved as a kid. I love weird old music when used properly in horror movies like that. But, you know, that's the end. We know it's not the end by a long shot, like I said. Halloween 3 came the next year, confused the hell out of everybody and pissed people off because they don't know how to have a good time. But, you know, times have changed, luckily. Halloween 2 was appropriately released on November 1st, oddly enough, but Halloween weekend of 1981. It was a great success. It made over $25.5 million on its $2.5 million budget, which doesn't sound like a lot nowadays, but if your movie makes 10 times its budget, that's a success. So I don't care. Don't even look at the total gross. Just think of that. It wasn't as successful as the first film, obviously, because its budget was, 4 or 5 times the size of it. The original was made for only a few $100,000 and made even more money. It was at the time, I think up until Blair Witch came out, the highest grossing independent film of all time, profit-wise. The next year, like I said, Season of the Witch failed to bring anyone back, so they eventually had to reboot, essentially, the Michael Myers franchise in Part 4. The Halloween franchise now sits at a staggering 13 films, including the upcoming Halloween Ends, or the Halloween Ends that just came out, depending on when you watch this video, or the Halloween Ends that came out a long time ago, depending on what day you watch this video. Anyways, there's 13 movies. The Halloween series has evolved into a very unique, one-of-a-kind, choose-your-own-adventure horror franchise, which makes it terribly inconsistent, but also very fun, because you can kind of watch however you want, and you get a different ending every time. You can watch Halloween 1, 2, and H2O. You can watch Halloween 1 and 2 and just leave it at that. You can watch Halloweens 1, 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. You can watch Halloweens 1, 2, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, you can just do whatever the hell you want. Or you can just watch Halloween 3 and have a blast. That's what I like to do. Saves a lot of time, too. And you still get all the Dick Warlock you need. Halloween 2, the one I'm talking about, is by far my favorite of the 3 Halloween 2 movies that technically exist. And oddly enough, one of those Halloween 2s is titled Halloween, so it's probably the only case where a sequel to a movie is titled the same exact thing as the original. I just think that's strange. They could have added a "the" or a subtitle of some sort, but they didn't. What are you going to do? These are confusing times. If you've never seen Halloween 2 from 1981, what the hell have you been doing with your life? Go do that. It's a very solid horror sequel, has always been one of my favorite part 2s of any horror franchise. And, you know, it's spooky season. I thought I'd start with this one. It seemed logical. So here we are. If you haven't watched it, I recommend doing a double feature back to back with the first one, because it makes a very swift 3-ish hour horror film that ramps up the gore the further it goes. And it's a very solid ending, as long as you don't watch any of the other 11 Halloween movies. Watching these movies back to back is something I used to do constantly, years before I ever got arrested for my cinephilia. So this has been the first official OCT2BER video. I'll probably watch a few more this week. I'm going to be out of town, so I'll see when I can do it. But Hocus Pocus 2 just came out today, the day I'm recording this. So there's an easy OCT2BER video to talk about soon. Plus, all the hip kids will be talking about it. So, you know, got to get up those YouTube algorithms and whatever the hell words people use. Once again, my name is Derek, the Convicted Cinephile. Please like, share, and subscribe. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.
Talk, shop, pop, movies.